right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our PackView webinar, Getting Ready for Brexit, a topic that has been around for several years and is now just getting very real down on the wire here. Before we get started, a couple logistics notes. We are recording this webinar. It will be emailed out to everyone who registered today, later today. And it will also be available on the PackView website at packview.com/webinars. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end today, so go ahead and use that question box on the control panel in Zoom, and we'll get to those at the end. I'm super excited to have a couple guest speakers with us today. So we have Andy Hooper of Global E-commerce Experts and Jerome DeGuigné of eCommerce, which is a partner of PackView. So I'm Adam Hutchinson. I'm the Director of Marketing here at PackView. We're an enterprise software for brands and agencies to manage their e-commerce advertising. We work across Amazon, Walmart, Instacart, and other marketplaces. We're based here in the US, but we are international. We work across both Asia and European marketplaces, including the UK and several European markets. We work with agencies like eCommerce to help accelerate brand advertising and really take a full funnel picture of their Amazon success. So Jerome, let me pass it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. So 2 words on myself. Yeah, I'm the founder of the agency eCommerce. We're based in Luxembourg in the heart of Europe. We help brands accelerate their growth on Amazon in Europe, but also in North America and in Asia. We are helping brands today which are based in Europe and also in North America. We do a full service from a strategic consulting into also account management, advertising, and that's where we are working day to day with PackView and enjoying it a lot. And that's why we're having this discussion, because we wanted also to share with all the PackView users or interested in PackView of the potentials or risks around Brexit. Andy, do you want to say a few things about yourself before we jump in?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for PackView putting this on. Thank you very much for having us. I've got the sun in my face. This is only to prove that it's sunny in the UK. So anyway, hi, my name's Andy. I'm the CEO here at Global E-commerce Experts, and we successfully expand sellers into the EU. So we typically do 3 sort of areas. We do compliance, which is VAT, making sure you're compliant with regulations. Do label compliance, making sure you're compliant with those regulations, identify those sort of things. And then we do 3PL, so we've got a warehouse, ring store facilities, and then we do some account management stuff as well. But things like translations and loads of other bits. But really our core focus is about successfully expanding sellers. We want to do what's right for the seller. We want to make sure that we don't do, when you're expanding, we know that margins are tight. You don't want to expand with everything. It's about being strategic. Exactly what Jerome was saying a moment ago about being that strategic partner to make that happen. We've worked well with Jerome in the past, and actually you can dovetail those things together to make that work. And I think the really important thing is that, leading into Brexit is making sure that we're clearly ready and everything's set up. So overall, I'm hopefully we can give you some nuggets around Brexit and make sure that you're ready come the 1st of January 2021.
So let's dive into it. So that was us. So we did, already all about us. So to start with, we wanted to give you a flavor about Amazon in Europe. So maybe some of you are very familiar about the size of Amazon in Europe, but some maybe less. So it's to give you a size of the price, let's say, of Amazon in Europe. So the first information on the left is you can see that for Amazon specifically, the size of the US is like very big. So probably around 65 to 70%. But then the second market after that is Germany. And then the third one is UK. And then after that, you will have the other countries, which are France, Italy, and Spain. And now 2 newcomers have arrived, is Holland, the Netherlands, and Sweden. So you can see that the expansion of Amazon will be a big part in Europe, not only, but Europe is a big one. And specifically Germany and the UK, which is important to bear in mind if you're looking at expanding into other countries. The second one which you would want to go into is Germany, and then the third one is UK, which is similar in size with Japan. but a bit easier in terms of languages when you're coming from the States. On the right side, you will see one thing which is interesting is a comparison of the Prime, the cost of Prime membership all over the world. So you can see in the States is $119, whereas in France, for example, it's 55. Why is that? It's because in France, Amazon is struggling a bit to have a leadership position. So they've positioned their price much lower. And you can see also the UK is more or less like in the States is 100. But then in Spain, it would be even lower, $40. So they are aligning to the market basically. And it gives you an idea of the size of Amazon, but also maybe the purchasing power of the people from that given country. Now, one picture I really like on the left is if you were to put the US, all the states of the United States into Europe to give you an idea, you can see that actually all of the states don't cover the whole of Europe. Specifically, if you start to add Sweden also, the market size geographically, but also in terms of number of people is quite significantly bigger in the Europe than in the States. It's a bit more complicated because you've got different languages and sometimes different currencies, but the size of the market overall is bigger in Europe. So it's an enormous potential for people in the US, for example, to expand into Europe. And that's what Andy and myself are helping a lot of brands do very successfully, because that's an enormous potential. On the right side, you can see that the UK is a big part of Europe, but it's a reasonable market if you compare to the rest of Europe, which is a massive number of countries. And you have to understand that a lot of countries, so Amazon is only in the UK, in Germany, in France, in the middle here, in Spain, in Italy. And it's going into Sweden very like in the coming weeks, and it's in the Netherlands. But you have to understand that all the Eastern countries, they buy mostly from Amazon Germany. That's one of the reasons why Amazon Germany is so big. So once you're on Amazon, actually in Europe, you're touching an enormous number of customers throughout the rest of Europe. And like Austria, Switzerland, they would buy from Germany, for example. Belgium would buy either from France or Germany, but that means the potential of the market is quite enormous. And what was the situation until, or what will be the situation until 31st of December, is that this market was seen as one market, and you could access it through what we call the pan-European fulfillment. So now let's talk about fulfillment. You've got three options in Europe. Either you ship you put your stock, or I'm talking for sellers in FBA, right? If you would put your stock into one country, let's say for the UK, and then you would be shipping throughout everywhere. The second option is you ship to every country individually, or the third option was one which was the best option up to now, and it still is a pan-EU option, which would make Amazon move your stock around by themselves to make it as close as possible to customers. To put it shortly, what are the benefits and drawbacks of each solution? The first one is that if you're using what they call EFN, European Fulfillment Network, that it's very simple. You don't need to have a lot of VAT numbers. You need only a VAT number in the UK. It's quite easy. You've got a threshold thing where you can't, if you're not doing too much business, it's okay. If you will do a lot of business, you will need to have multiple VAT numbers. But at the beginning, it's a very simple one. The only drawback is the cost. Basically, if your products are less than 25 euros retail price, or 25 pounds, $25 more or less, like probably the cost will be too high for your, the logistics will kill your profits. That's the first option. The second option is what we call MCI, multi-country inventories. That's where you ship to every country, every Amazon country individually. The benefit is you've got less fees because logistics is local, so Amazon will charge you less fees. It's great if your catalog is not exactly the same per country, because you can tailor it. The drawback is that it's complex because you have multiple warehouses or multiple stocks in multiple countries, and you can't move them so easily from one country to another. The other complexity is that each time you warehouse a product in a country, you will need to have a VAT number in that country. The value added tax will have to be paid in the country where you are warehousing your product. The last option is a pan-EU option where you put your products in one country, say in the UK, and you can and then Amazon will send it over to many different countries. And you can see that on the map on the right, you've got two other countries which are in color. It's Poland and Czech Republic, because Amazon has got also warehouses in Poland and Czech Republic, which are cheaper than in Germany. But therefore, because Amazon will put your products in those countries, that means you will have to have VAT numbers in those countries. So the major impact for you is that it's very simple. It's also the best customer experience for customers in the sense that they will get the products within 1 day everywhere in Europe. So that's the best for sales. The drawback is that you will need the same products everywhere because Amazon cannot manage exceptions. And you will need VAT numbers in every country. That's in 7 countries. And this will increase now with Holland 8 and probably Sweden in the next step. And you can have some fees which are still quite expensive because they're moving things around. So today, or let's say until last year or until Brexit started, we would have said, okay, pan-EU is the best option because it's, if you want to grow your sales, it's the best way to let Amazon handle logistics because that's really their strong point. And you have pan-EU, it's very simple. You put it in the UK, it will go throughout Europe, or you put it in Germany and it will go throughout Europe. But that will stop on the 31st of December 2020. 1st of January 2021, Andy will tell you what's going to happen.
Thanks, Jerome. Are you leading me in to say, Andy will tell you what happens, it's going to be amazing, or it's going to be, I'm not sure where you were leading into with that. I don't know if that was an open question, but
well, you're British,
thank you
so,
to,
I don't want to,
well, like,
you know.
Well, look, thanks, Jerome. I think there's some hugely useful information here. I think that the key thing is once we get to Brexit, if we take a look at those maps again, Jerome, if we could go back one slide, if that's all right, just to have a look at those. Once the UK leaves Europe, no longer will the UK be in part of the European Fulfilment Network or the Pan-European Network, because it's no longer part of Europe. So the UK will not be part of the European fulfillment options that are available, whichever one you use. So you will end up with a multi-country inventory / a pan-EU stroke a UK option, essentially. And I think that anyone is going to want to, when they're looking to expand, is going to need to get their head around what that looks like. Thanks, Jerome. So, I think Brexit, there's a whole load of different things to think about with Brexit. And I think that everyone, regardless of the opinions around it, the key thing to know is that come the 1st of January, we are leaving the EU. The UK will no longer be part of the European house, countries, whatever you want to call it, and all the privileges therefore that come with that. So for example, the European Fulfillment Network today, I ship this, someone buys this product in Germany, I can ship that to them from the UK and there's no additional customs, duties or anything else to pay. Come the 1st of January, as it stands today, what's going to happen is if you fulfill that to Germany, not only will you have to pay the customs and duty coming into the UK when you originally ship it, there's a likelihood you're going to have to pay customs and duty as it goes to the buyer in Germany as well, or other parts of Europe. So I think it's really important to understand that come the 1st of January, there is a very real issue that you don't want to have those additional costs that are going to make it unfeasible for you to do. And you need to be prepared for that now, not on the 1st of January, because everything to do with VAT, getting registered for VAT, everything takes time. And it's really, really important that you make sure you're prepared before the date. So that's really the difference. And it's going to depend on where you're based. So if you're based inside the EU or you're based outside the EU, there's probably going to be some differences to consider. Given that with probably, I think most of this audience is based outside the EU, I think I'm going to focus most of my information on that. If you've got specific questions, then we can take those at the end that are specific for inside the EU, if everyone else is okay with that. So with the being outside the EU, what you're then again now going to consider is where you need to ship your products to. So do you ship your products all to Europe, or are you going to ship products to the UK, or are you going to ship them to both, and so on? So let's move on to the next slide, Jerome, if that's okay. So fulfillment. Okay, so let's just touch on some of the real simple basics. You need to pay VAT, or you need to be VAT registered where you fulfill the goods from first and foremost, or where you meet a distance selling threshold. So like in the States, you have Nexus, there's cross-border thresholds you get to. In Europe, it's exactly the same. I can ship from the UK currently into Germany, and I can sell 100,000 euros worth of goods before I have to be registered there. Now, obviously come Brexit, you're going to have to be registered in the UK, and you're going to need to be registered somewhere in Europe. The customs piece we've already talked about. You're going to need to think about that customs border issue. And I would suggest that you don't have to deal with that by being registered in both. And that's really where we come into. You need goods both in the UK and in Europe. Sending goods from the UK to Europe or Europe to the UK is just going to be too costly to do. It will just wipe out the whole of your profit and will almost make it unviable if you're not careful, unless you've got a large profit margin, which is absolutely fine. So the key thing to think about is where are you going to put those products? Which countries are going to be the best options for you? And what does that look like? So I think we've got some suggestions we're going to come on to, and I'm going to skip straight past Amazon FBA because we've already discussed that. You need to consider, you've got EFN and Pan EU, but you need to make sure that, it's not going to be in the UK, because UK is not going to be in part of the European network. Okay, on to the next one. So what would I do in your position? And I think that depends on two things. One thing really, it depends on the size of seller that you are. If you do 10,000 euros, 10,000 pounds in Europe, then I'm going to suggest one thing. If you do over 100,000, I'm probably going to suggest something slightly different, because that's going to be relevant to you and what you're doing. So the first thing to say is you need to be registered for VAT in 2 countries. Those 2 countries I would recommend would be the UK, because you don't really have any other options to register in that UK part, and Germany. Now, the reason I say the UK and Germany is because the UK and Germany overall, as a whole market, probably accounts for 2/3 of all sales on Amazon in Europe. Therefore, by being registered in 2 countries, you've got 66% of the market share. Now, I appreciate I've just said that the UK is part of Europe still there, and that's obviously a fraudulent slip because I'm not quite ready for it. But you see where I'm coming from. So by being registered in the UK and Germany, you've got the biggest slices of the pie, if you like. And I think that's really, really important, that you know that you're going to get that biggest part. The downside to that is that you've got to have 2 VAT numbers. The downside to that is it's going to cost more money. Yes, I totally get that. And I totally appreciate that you won't want to do that unless you genuinely have to. You need to plan for that. And the reason for that is that Germany could take 3 to 6 months to get a VAT number. Now, if you've not already registered for a VAT number in Germany, there's a very high chance that that might not come back in time. And that is a very real issue that you now face if you have not done that. Now, we do think we can still get Germany through before Brexit, but there is no guarantee of that. There are other options like Italy. Italy's a much quicker process. We could get that through in 10 days. So what we're actually saying is that, the first thing to say is UK and Germany is by far the best way. Go for UK and Germany, get those 2 sorted and register in those. If the registration hasn't come by Christmas, let's say, then actually we probably need to think about making sure we've got you registered in Italy as well. The other option is just to register in Italy. Or France. France is a bit difficult as well. Spain's a pain in the backside. don't register there unless you really need to. If you're on the Pan-EU program, you have no option. But outside of that, you really don't want to do that unless you really have to. So, Germany is the go-to. Italy, because it is quicker. You could go, well, actually, we'll just wait till Brexit and do Italy. You wait till the 1st of December. You can do that, but you're only going to get Prime available to you in Italy. Now, the Italian market is nowhere near the size of the German market. So you're missing a whole, coming back to the pie, I like my pie, you're missing that whole piece of the cake that you're going to get to. So I think you really need to consider what those options look like. Now, the other option is, if you are a larger seller, is that actually you register in the Netherlands as well. Now, the idea of registering Netherlands is, if you're sending large shipments into Netherlands, there's a whole VAT deferment process that you can go through. So you don't actually have to pay the import VAT. Getting stock into the Netherlands is a lot easier than Germany. Getting stock into Germany is really difficult. Your EORI number in Germany has to be a German address. You can't just have, your German EORI that doesn't go to a German address. And it has to be on what we call the VIE's checker. It has to be on there. So there's a whole load of options around there, and I'm pretty sure I'm coming up to my 10 minutes. So I know we're sort of running up to that. Jerome's laughing because he's like, Andy, I know you're going to go over. I'm dedicated to not going over that 10 minutes.
No, I had a question for you.
Yeah, go on.
Maybe you can explain a bit about the EORI number, because that's a very important aspect of what you need also to be ready in terms of having one in the UK and one in the rest of Europe, maybe.
Yeah, perfect. Am I allowed 12 minutes now? So EORI is a really key thing, actually. So an EORI number, for those that don't know, is basically a European number that basically allows you to ship your goods into Europe. Now, obviously, we're no longer going to be in Europe, but we will be keeping hold of the EORI number for now. I'm sure in time it will change. So if you register for an EORI number in the UK, you get a UK EORI number. If you register for an EORI number in Germany, you get a German EORI number. So if you're shipping into Germany, you need a German EORI number, and that German number needs an address where basically customs, when they type in your EORI number, they'll go, where does that EORI number go to? Ah, that's a German address. Great, let's phone them. And they will phone that address. So to mitigate that, we've actually got a German address and a German phone number to basically make sure that we can cater for that, because that's a real issue that sellers face. So you need to make sure that you've got an EORI number as well as a VAT number. The advantage is a decent agency like ours that can do VAT numbers will get an EORI number for you at the same time they do your VAT registration. So you need to make sure that if you've already got a German VAT number, or you've already got those VAT numbers, you need to make sure that you've also got that EORI number. So that's a great question, Jerome. Thank you. And then once you've got the VAT numbers, the next thing is to make sure you've got stock in those countries. Now, you need to make sure you've got that stock into Germany, if we're talking about Germany or Netherlands or France or Italy or wherever, before the 1st of January, which likely means you probably need to order more stock in order to make sure you've got stock for Q4 and then leading into Q1, and it's split between those countries. So there is a chance that actually you might need a bit more stock to make sure you've got that split, across those countries. Because, we know that come the 1st of January, there's going to be sales and people are going to want to sell more in that period after Christmas. What we're going to want to do is make sure that we can push that. But if you haven't got stock in Europe, you're not going to be able to push that in Europe. You're only going to be able to push that in UK. And I think
that's a great presentation, Andy. Well done.
What I want to know is, was that 10 minutes or not? Anyway.
So perfect. It was great. Yeah. No, I think it's a great insight. And I think as a summary, it's preparation. And I think that's what we're really trying to highlight, is that now you need to move as fast as you can if you're in Europe and if you want to address both those markets, because UK will become a bit like the United States for the rest of Europe. It's a total different country where you will have duties and things, which was not the case since many years. So I think Adam's got some numbers he wanted to share with us, so we'll hand over to you.
Great, thanks Jerome, and thanks Andy. So just level setting here, providing some context on what to look out for as an advertiser in Europe and what kind of impacts we expect as we go into the year. So this first slide that we'll look at here, Jerome, is just kind of level setting benchmarks between the marketplaces. And so this is an aggregate level look. This is first party data from PackView. And obviously the point here isn't that this is going to be true for every business, but a couple of things stand out when we look at this just at first glance, right? First is the big discrepancy between the United States and Europe as a whole. Not surprising at all, but Europe, there's so much opportunity here. And so if you combine the fact of what Jerome said on the actual population size of people shopping or could be shopping on Amazon in Europe is actually larger than the United States. And it's actually cheaper right now to do advertising in Europe. There's a huge, huge open opportunity for brands to take advantage of this. And if we look at the discrepancy too amongst marketplaces themselves, the more expensive ones tend to be the ones that have been around longer or a little bit more mature in their life cycle, like the UK, for example. This is true in the United States too. As Amazon goes into new categories, as Amazon goes into new regions, locales, we tend to see costs for advertising stay pretty cheap at first, and then over time, as that market builds, both as more consumers get into that market, as well as more competitors get in there and start advertising into those consumers, we see those costs rise. So point being, first mover advantage, now is the time to get in and really take advantage of the open opportunity here. And I think the other thing that I'll mention on this slide is that Europe is not a monolith, right? We see these discrepancies because there are differences both in consumer behavior as well as just simply where your competitors are currently in the European marketplace. And we don't even have Netherlands on here right now, but that's an entirely new marketplace this year that's just starting to open up. A lot of open kind of green pasture there for advertising, and then same for Sweden later this year. So what we advise brands is really take a look down at the category level of where your competitors and where they're not currently, and use that to your advantage to get in front of consumers and start to win market share early. If we look at the next slide here, this is advertising trends month by month basis for 2020 so far. And obviously what we're looking at is the impact of COVID-19 and pandemic and the shutdowns. But what I think is really interesting here is the main storyline that we've seen both in the US and in Europe is that this is actually, it's a supply chain story. It's an inventory story. Advertising was impacted drastically as brands started going out of stock. So what we saw in the US, that this started happening around March and into April, similar time frame, slightly delayed in Europe. What we started seeing was obviously as ability to ship items into countries got tighter and tighter, and just production of items reduced as well. We saw the brands pull back drastically on their advertising dollars. But what actually happened was consumers were still shopping online, and demand actually increased over this time frame. So you saw the price for these auction bids decreased while demand continued to increase. And so there was a huge advantage for the advertisers that were continuing to spend on these platforms, again, with the big caveat that if you had the supply and the inventory in order to do that. And so as we look ahead to Brexit, this is kind of the number one thing that we're talking to people about from an advertising perspective is there's not going to be this drastic difference in advertising. Where you're going to get hit is, do you have the stock where your consumers are currently buying? Are you going to be able to keep that inventory up? And more importantly, are your competitors going to be able to keep their inventory as well? Or is there open opportunity to go gain market share because they're going out of stock on their top tier items, and you can go into competitive conquesting and take some of their customers? So we expect to see some of these trends, again, as long as consumer demand stays high and stock becomes more restrictive. That's actually an open advertising opportunity for you to go step in. And the next slide here is just the same view of this, just at ROAS. So again, there's always an immediate kind of pullback in terms of return on ad spend when there's these big supply chain disruptions. But the brands who are able to lean into that and find opportunities for competitive conquesting see huge returns on that because the price for these auctions are so much cheaper, demand is high. And then in both the Europe and the US, we see this drop off in ROAS as we go into Q4, as a lot of deals are coming online, as people are pricing down their items. And then obviously consumer demand pulls back slightly before we get into the big Q4 timeframe. So this will start to rise again. But again, similar thing as we look forward into Brexit. You know, we'll have the normal kind of seasonality post Q4 pullback on spend, but as well, if there are shipping concerns, if consumers are seeing very long ship times for products that they're used to, that just kills conversion rates, right? So being aware of, are you in stock in the places that you need to be, is going to be your biggest impact on return on ad spend. The final slide here is just in general category data at an aggregate level. And really the point that I want to make is that everything I just said doesn't matter unless you're looking at it at a category level, because there's so many discrepancies between the way consumers shop, the different locations that are stronger in certain categories rather than others, and of course where your competitors are versus where they're not. And so great to look at the macroeconomic trends, but really drill down into what's happening specifically with your category, pick your top competitors, and look at those by marketplace. You might have one competitor that's very strong in the UK and will remain strong in the UK, but it's going to get hurt in the rest of Europe because they haven't figured out these supply chain issues. That's an opportunity for you to step in. And so one of the way that we measure this at PackView is digital share of voice, looking at your competitors by product, by keyword and category search terms. Are they falling off on page one? Are they not showing up as often because they're going out of stock, because they have to pull back on advertising? Being able to track that and then being able to respond to that, to jump in and advertise wherever your competitors are falling off, is actually where you get those big kind of stepwise gains in your strategy. So that's all we have from the advertising data. Obviously, we're happy to answer any other questions as well, but I think we actually have some questions coming in, so why don't we start to take those? And the first one that we have here is one that we hear a lot, which is, what are the pros and cons of being set up as a vendor versus a seller, specifically in Europe? Andy, Jerome?
So I'll take this one, Andy.
Yeah, please
You'll
do.
fight for the next one. The difference in Europe compared to the US, that in Europe you still can get invites for vendor accounts. It's becoming a bit difficult, but it's easier than in the US. The main benefit is, for me, is, long story short, is for having a vendor account is if you don't have any pricing issue, so there's no fight on the buy box. And if your product is a high runner, then the vendor account will be the most successful one. And it's also simple in terms of VAT because it's a B2B relationship, so there's no VAT stuff. For any other type of product, so if it's not running very well and the algorithm will not pick it, then Amazon will not start to buy it and it will not be offered on the vendor side, and the cycle will not work. So on the seller side, you have the long tail, you have also items which are completely new and you want to test. So the best situation we like to have is a hybrid, in a sense, where you test products on the seller and then when they run well, you put them on the vendor side. The only thing you need to note on the vendor side is that you need to be able to ship within 5 days. So that means if you're based in the US, you need to have a fulfillment center or warehouse you own in Europe to be able to fulfill orders from the vendor side. If you can't do that, then you have no choice. You have to be a seller. That was the short version.
So for US brands that are looking to expand into Europe, knowing we're so close to 1st of January, what do you recommend they do now, or should they wait?
You mean going to Europe altogether, or specifically linked to Brexit?
A US brand who's
In
maybe
general.
expanding to Europe for the first time or wanting to expand their offerings in Europe.
It's like there's no bad or good time. Obviously, if you go now, you will probably miss out the hype of Q4 because the algorithm will not have time to pick and so on. But it's like it's not worth to go here than rather than in January. Okay, the FBA costs would be a bit higher, things like that, but you could start the earlier you start to prepare, the better. So start with getting the VAT number, EORI number, figuring out what's your best solution, vendor or seller. We're partners and we work a lot with Andy on the VAT side. Find people who know about it and have a chat with us or with other people and try to get an understanding to start, but get the right kind of information before starting.
I think, yeah, I mean, there's never a good or bad time. Just get on with it and make it happen. That's generally my sort of, if you wait, you're just stalling. Like, it's just an excuse. So, oh, well, should we wait because of this? Should we do that? There's never a right time. Get on with it, make it happen. My suggestion would be you register in both the UK and Germany, and you've then got both opportunities, and then you've got everything covered. That would be my that's the way to go. Do both. Keep it simple. If you need a fulfillment house, like Jerome was saying, then you've got all those options. We've got something, but there's plenty of options out there. But really, you want to focus on getting a VAT number, getting the EORI number, and just get shipping. Like, there's never a good time. Get on with it.
Great. So we have another question here about what's. Oh, go ahead, Jerome.
No, I said yes, Dad.
Yeah. Another question coming in around advertising. What is going to be the impact of Brexit on advertising on Amazon? So short answer, no. Nothing's fundamentally changing on advertising. The bigger impact is obviously on inventory, and then how does inventory and also total sales and demand impacting our advertising strategy? Jerome, is there anything else you want to say on that?
No, it's generally, it's like if you run out of stock, you're throwing money out of the door, and actually sponsored products will not run, and your sponsored brands advertising will be funding others which are probably selling. So the idea is really on the advertising per se, there won't be any specific keywords, I don't believe so, but it's just making sure your fulfillment is running. That's all.
Great. Okay, so a question coming in: if you do not get stock in the EU market before January 1st, what does that process look like to fix that situation? Especially if you haven't registered for a VAT yet.
So I think that, if you haven't registered a VAT number, you won't be able to set up a European, if you're based outside, you won't be able to set up a European Amazon account and ship. You'll be able to set up an account, but without a VAT number, Amazon won't let you actually sell anything. So what I'm presuming there is that they're selling on .com, let's say, and someone from Europe buys the product and then ships it direct to the customer. So you can do that, no problems at all, and you still will be able to do that. And essentially, there'll be no difference because someone will have to pick up the duties and customs when they arrive at the customer's door. So, if you ship it to me, I'm going to have to go and pay the customs and duties when it turns up at my door. Now, most people don't want to do that. It's just a put off. So you can still do that. There's no drama with that. The other way around that is you can still have a VAT number in, let's say, the UK. And what you could do is that you could ship your products from the States directly into Germany if someone buys it in Germany rather than going from the UK. So instead of paying, let's say you've got your products in the UK, and you've had to pay import duty and tax coming into the UK. If someone pays it in Germany, instead of having to pay it again, what you could do is you could ship it straight from the US, let's say, directly to the customer in Germany. You're not paying VAT twice on that product, if that makes sense. So that's another option. But you've said there that you're not registered for VAT anywhere, or you're not successfully registered. That if you need help successfully registering, then give us a shout. But that's what I would recommend. You can still ship from the .com directly in. You'll just pay the customs, or the customer will pay the customs and duty.
But it's not a great way sustainable to grow the business, obviously. If you want to invest long term, you really need to do it properly, sit down, have a strategy, and then go step by step.
Agreed.
So we have another person here who they do have their German VAT number. They do not have their EORI number yet for Germany. They're wondering kind of pros, cons, the difficulty of an expense of getting a physical location in Germany versus just doing another country in Europe.
Okay, so with the EORI number, you can get a German EORI number without a German address. That's actually not a problem. But you need to make sure that actually when you get the EORI number, it has a German address on there. They don't tell you that, but that's the information you need. Because when someone says, oh, we can do your German EORI number for you, yeah, you can get one, but it has to have that German address on it. Now, there's two options. You know, you could get a Mau house or a buy an address somewhere. That's one thing that you could do. So you could do that, and that would give you an address. But what you also need is a phone number with that, because customs will look at the address and phone that number to make sure that that's a German address. So that German number could come directly to you and be re-forwarded. I guess that could work. There's no problem with that. So that could happen. The easier way to do is to make sure is you could work with us. We could give you a German address, and then that's a lot more affordable. And then if someone phones, you know that someone's going to pick up the phone in German and answer in German and make that happen for you. So that's the other option. I think that really answers that. You know, basically, you just need to get a German address on it when you register for the EORI number.
I think it's you need to set up, also decide which market you want to go to based on the potential of your brand. Usually, like, okay, 80% of the time, Germany will be the biggest potential in Europe because Germany is so big. But some brands could have a special recognition in one specific market. Like if you're specifically well known in France for whatever, or Italy or Spain, you will probably want to base yourself in that country and make it your home country. So I say our advice is usually to not go from the cost level specifically, but try to find the market which will make most sense. And like Andy said, most of the time it's Germany.
And Andy, you did mention on the Netherlands. Are there specific advantages or disadvantages between Netherlands and Germany?
Yeah, Netherlands, there is some advantages. Basically, with Netherlands, when you're importing into there, one, it's easier to get the stock in there. And that's because it just flies through, because they're a logistics country, really. Like that's what they do. If you think of all the biggest retailers around the world, they ship everything into the Netherlands as the gateway to Europe, without any shadow of a doubt. That's what happens. They're just set up for it. So, you know, everything that goes in, I'm not saying Germany can't deal with it, but they're well used to it. They're just dealing with on such a bigger volume than what Germany are. And the other thing is that why else does that work? Well, what actually can happen is with when you're shipping into Europe, you need to pay import VAT. Now, when you're shipping into the Netherlands, you can defer your import VAT to do that on your VAT return. Now, the advantage from a cash flow point of view is significant. So if you're a smaller seller, you know, actually the cash flow part of that, whilst it's important, we're not talking tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're actually talking a small amount of money. But if you're a bigger seller, actually your import VAT could be a large sum of cash. You've just put a container, you've brought a container into Rotterdam or into Amsterdam, you've brought that in, you've spent tens, if not hundreds of thousands on stock. Then bear in mind, you've not sold any of that yet. You know, you've then got to pay your import VAT. Well, if you've got 3 months before you do your VAT return potentially, yeah, then all of a sudden you've got 3 months grace to start selling that before you give the government any money. And then, so it really, really helps with cash flow. You know, the downside is you've got to be VAT registered somewhere else, and there's an additional cost for that. But that's why it works once you start scaling, because it's much more effective. And there's a whole load of other benefits as well. But that really is the key thing that most sellers, it's like, I can defer my VAT. Whoa, that's like a game changer for some.
Great. So I know we've talked a lot about obviously making sure you're still in Europe. What about vice versa though? We have a person here who is a large European seller. They want to make sure they can continue growing in the UK. What are the next steps for that? And does Amazon have any kind of offerings to help with that process?
So if they're already in the UK and selling in the UK, like the UK, inside UK business will not be affected. If their initial stock is in the UK, that's not a problem. What will be affected is the rest of Europe. Like if they were fulfilling the orders from the rest of Europe from the UK, that will change, because either they were shipping it to Amazon or shipping it directly to customers from the UK. Before, there was no import taxes, there's no duties. Tomorrow, from 1st of January, there will be duties and delays. Basically, the idea is that before you could send it through. Now, probably customs will check. We'll have to. You'll have a lot of paperwork to do. That's the main impact. And what we're saying is, put your stock in advance in Germany or wherever to test it first and to make sure it's already flowing, because probably a lot of people will react after 1st of January, and there will be a lot of backlog of asking for VAT, of this and that. The earlier you get started, the better you will be organized. But for sure, it's like inside UK is okay. It's outside of the UK or outside of Europe into UK. It's the cross-border thing, which is an issue.
Yeah, and I think I think if you're based in Europe and you want to carry on selling in the UK, I think there's some things to consider. If you want to carry on selling in the UK, first of all, you need to make sure you've got a VAT number. That's the first thing. So you need an EORI number for UK. That's the second thing. I think the next thing is you need to consider what the logistics around that look like. How are you going to because at the moment, if you're on Pan EU, you're just going to dump your products into one country. And I mean, dump, I'm sure you do it a lot more effectively than that. But really what you're looking then to do is then for Amazon to distribute that for you. Well, post Brexit, Amazon's not going to ship that to the UK for you. That is not going to happen. So you are going to have to ship your products, one, to the UK, and secondly, to Europe. So you're going to have that split. Ideally, you're going to want to do that from a point of view from where your manufacturer sending those products directly into those two countries. Now, depending on how large you are, it's going to depend on whether you can send a container to each. There are options coming up around something called free ports, which we'll discuss at a later time, I'm sure. But really, you're going to send two shipments, one to Europe, one to the UK. Key thing, VAT number, the EORI number. You need to consider the logistics. Make sure you've got a 3PL that can do that for you, and so on.
Great. So I know we're running pretty low on time here. Jerome, Andy, do you have any kind of final thoughts for our audience?
Thank you, sir. We can't stress enough the fact of being ready. It's like either you want to move fast and you need to do it now. Otherwise, you probably have to wait for Q2, because my expectations, and I think Andy will agree on that, is that Q1 will be a mess, because like customs will have to restart working, and they don't know, and a lot of flows, and even Amazon doesn't really know for sure. So they will probably be cutting a lot of things, and that's what we're saying. Okay, before that mess, send things out. So you need to take a decision. If you're unsure about Europe, then maybe give it another 6 months and don't rush. If you're sure it has a big potential, because most of the time it has, then move as fast as you can.
Yeah, and I think just leading on from that. Go on, if you finished, Jerome. Sorry, you look like you was about to go again.
No, I was.
I'm just going to echo certainly part of that. I think the first thing is it's going to be a bum fight. There is no, this is completely unknown to all governments. And whilst everyone puts the best possible strategies in place, we all know that the tactics of battle don't always lay best when the plan's put in place. So we can put the best plans in the world, but the reality is governments don't have a huge track record of doing things that great when it comes to these sort of projects. And you need to make sure that whatever happens, you're mitigating the risk for your business in the best possible way. And mitigating that risk from my side, looking for the sellers that we work with, is you need to be VAT registered in UK and Europe. You need to have an EORI number in both. You need to have a logistics provider in both. And you need to make sure that you've got stock in both. And whatever happens from there, you need to make sure that by doing those things, you're okay. All right. Outside of that, what happens with the customs, exactly as Jerome said, it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to take longer. It's just going to take longer. Like, there's no doubt about that. I go to the Netherlands. We've got a warehouse in the Netherlands. I'm going tomorrow. I went by ferry the other week, and it was taking a lot longer to go via ferry than it would do normally. Bear in mind that the ferry can take 1,000 passengers or 1,000 cars. I don't know I can't remember which. And there was 58 passengers on board this ferry. And because, no one's obviously traveling, and it took longer to get on the boat than it normally does. And they only had 58 people, 58 cars. I mean, like, either way, they were checking every car. And I was like, why are we checking so much? Feel free to check. I've got no drama with that. Oh, well, because of Brexit, we're learning how to do it. well, great, but it was just a nightmare, basically. So hopefully, from my side, my advice to you is get a VAT number in the UK and Europe, get an EORI number, get a list of logistics, make sure your stock's there, and overall, you're mitigating that risk as best you possibly can. And just seek out the best advice, whether that's Jerome, Adam, me, whoever that is. Make sure you're seeking that advice to make sure you're doing the right thing to mitigate the risk on your brand and to make sure it's a success.
Jerome, if you want to throw up the next slide with our contact info on there. If there are any other questions, obviously feel free to reach out to any one of us here. And obviously you can always reach out to PackView if you're a current PackView client. We can certainly connect you with Jerome, with Andy, with whoever you need to help you kind of through this process. This webinar will be available online. We'll email it out. You can go to packview.com/webinars, as well as see all of our previous ones. And we have our next CPC report, quarterly CPC report, is coming out in a couple weeks here. We have a webinar on the 22nd for that, so make sure to sign up to get all of that great data. Otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks, Jerome. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks very much, Jerome. Thanks, PackView.
Bye.
Much appreciated. Have a great day.